gonna start the stream because we're already 5 minutes late. S-Man, I guess he was going to do the host of the hangout, so that way he could stream to his channel. I'm not sure. Alright, so if anybody's actually here, don't see anybody in the live chat, doesn't seem to be anybody on the channel at the moment. That gives me a chance to test out my settings. I switched to a different OBS. Yeah, and I can hear myself in the background there. Alright. Peak concurrent? I think that just might be me. Alright, so it's telling me my stream is not a good quality. I'm not sure why. It was good earlier. Nothing has changed. Nobody else is on the internet here. My internet speeds are fine. Should be, I don't know. Should be a decent quality stream. I don't know what. Okay. So, let me, so if you can't tell at the moment, I've actually got this set up in Streamlabs version of OBS. It's pretty much similar to the OBS I've been using in the previously, although there are some differences. So in the bottom right hand corner there's this little tip jar, and in the bottom left hand corner there's a I forget what that is. That is the view counter, I think. So those things will be showing up in the stream, at least that's the plan. Let me see if I mute myself and catch up. So right now nobody else is watching, but maybe once people actually start joining in, and it is what it is. It's becoming painfully obvious to me over the past. Yeah, nobody else is here. I'm just talking to myself at this point. Yep, painfully obvious to me over the recent past couple of weeks and months that I am inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. Man, that is sad. Okay, it's still giving me an okay as opposed to good like it was giving me earlier. But nobody's watching anyway. So I'm not really. So the idea of this particular stream was to talk about Patreon and Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin's recent video on the subject. Sam Harris leaving the platform, but nobody's here at the moment, so I'm gonna work out technical details. Technical issues while I wait for S-Man to set up his hangout link. Oh, I actually had somebody show up. Who is this? I mean, of course I did. Alright, so not really starting the stream yet, although this is kind of so I don't know if you saw what I posted in the stream. So I going for about 2 hours, so from 4 to 6, talking about the whole Patreon issue and what's kind of the fallout of everything that's happened since the banning of Sargon. Talking about my own efforts and my own what's the words I'm looking for there? Not flaws, but my own setbacks in my efforts over the past year to create. Which is what my plan was starting a year ago, and unfortunately, this is not something you can do as a one-man operation. This is, you can't go, yeah, so you can't start, but, so this is the thing that bugs me. Is like, they've got all these people who are like, oh yeah, these are self-made, you know, millionaires and billionaires, you know, oh, you could just be the next Zuckerberg. And I'm like, well, Zuckerberg was paid by the Winklevoss twins he had a financier. He had backers for his project before he created Facebook. This is, yeah, he kind of screwed over. Elon Musk, yeah. Yeah, Elon Musk, even though Elon Musk started a business out of his, like, he was living with, I think it was with his brother at the time, and they were living out of their office, working on their first website. This is before PayPal and that. But they had financial backing in order to start their business to begin with. Mark Cuban, same thing. Even though he started his website on his own, he had financial backers that were willing to put money up into his project before he Well, that's... Oh, yeah, they definitely have the cash. Jordan Peterson by himself rakes in just on Patreon, not including his book sales, not including his partnership with or his speaking tours and things like that. Just on Patreon, more than $80,000 a month. That's easily, yeah. Like, because like I'm saying is like, well, I know it's gonna take capital for me to get started for anybody, like for the project I started. I've been reaching out to these people for over a year, explaining the problem, explaining the solutions, and I'm inconsequential. That's what I keep hearing back. The only people who have bothered to listen to what I have to say is Mr. Dapperton, Blonde, and Matt. Blonde. What's her actual name? Rebecca. I don't even know if she's given her last name, but Rebecca and Matt Christensen from Blonde and the Beauty and the Beta is the name of the podcast that they do. Oh, there's S-Man. You can start your own Hangout stream if you want to have this on your channel. I just started this because I was like, okay, it's already past 4 o'clock. So I can switch over because I'm streaming and I'm also testing out my Streamlabs OBS setup because it's slightly different from OBS, but yeah, if you want to go ahead and start that. It's about Patreon. So I titled mine Patreon, more like Pay-REEEEE-on. Or Pat-REEEEE-on? I don't know how you would actually pronounce that. Yeah. More like, yeah. Yeah, Pay-REEEEE-on. Am I right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as soon as we get that Twitter link, we'll hop over there. I don't want to get too deep into this discussion before we can do that, because otherwise it's gonna be a little too disjointed. But yeah, the backlash I think has been I'm over here saying finally this should have happened a year ago. This should have been the outcry a year ago, but it's just now starting to pick up steam. But yeah. But all right, let's see. Let's switch. Okay. All right, I'm gonna switch over to S-Man's Hangout here. All right. All right. Okay, I can hear you, although I can still hear Loudmouth. Do I need to leave that one as well? Let me see. I just got to make sure that my my OBS is showing the correct Hangout here. Okay, whoops, that's not what I was looking for. So I gotta go to editor. Oh, well, let me just yeah, I'm still showing the Hangouts with Loudmouth. So let me close that out. Alright, sorry for the blank screen there, anybody who's actually watching, but there we go. So there's S-Man. Alright, and anybody who's watching the stream or in the pop in the chat or anything like that, let me know if, oh, there we go. Yeah, let me know if the sound quality is bad, because I know I had issues with that when I was first doing OBS, and so this is a new instance of OBS. Seems to be working just fine for me, and from what I could tell from my initial testing and stuff like that. Okay, so everybody's here, and hopefully Loudmouth will join us over on this hangout. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Maker support. So that came out about a year ago, and it did not last very long. It lasted a few months, and then PayPal pulled support for it. And now, according to Sargon and some of the other people in his little, V and a couple other people, they're talking about how Maker support is still receiving donations. They're still people are still being charged by Maker support, but it's not going to creators anymore. So they have been urging people to stop payments to that system because it is no longer being processed. PayPal has stopped processing payments for Maker support, which means money is going into Maker support and it's not going anywhere else. So I don't know what exactly Maker support switched to receive funds, because they do need a payment gateway for that. It's possible they were doing that on their own, although I'm not sure how exactly. That doesn't seem likely. But what I was talking with my brother earlier about that, with Maker support, it was purported to be a one-man operation, and yet this one guy was able to make rapid changes to his website on a daily basis, fixing technical issues that I was like, that's something that would take, several hours, if not days, to investigate the source of it, and yet he's turning around fixes every day, modifying it, adding new features, and I'm like, this one guy, at the time, I was thinking that was really, really impressive, and I'm like, man, I feel woefully inadequate. But when PayPal pulled their support and they kept receiving payments, and people have no way of stopping their payments within Maker support, because Maker support, the whole website's down. You can't change your subscriptions, you can't cancel subscriptions, the whole thing is just, and yet money is still coming out of people's accounts going to Maker support. So that leads me to think this is not a one-man operation like they'd claimed to be. This is actually a group of people, and they built up the website, and we're acting like we're acting as if they were, this is all speculation on my end, but acting as if they were the underdog fighting back against, big tech, but maybe it was a group of a team of 5 to 10 people working on the project, trying to get enough people to join in, and once they had enough people, then they're like, oh, well, we'll just claim PayPal cut us off and then shut down the website. So it's very possible PayPal has not severed ties with Maker support, but Maker support is just scamming people out of their money. Once they okay, we get $10,000 a month being deposited in our accounts, or however much is being run through Maker support, act as if we've lost our payment processor, shut down the site so people can't change anything, and then we just take in several $1,000s a month, and they can't stop us. Not easily. So it seems very much like a scam, which makes it harder for other startups to compete and that sort of thing. So Maker support was only around for, I think, like 5 months, if that. And when it first came out, I was like, okay, glad there's an alternative, but that's not a lasting solution. So whether maker support was a scam or not, that's speculation on my part, but the fact that it's shut down, that's not. That's like, okay, that was going to happen either way. Either they weren't legit and they couldn't handle the traffic, or they wouldn't be able to hold up with they wouldn't actually be able to compete with Patreon, or they would lose their payment processor. So which is why, that's why I said, okay, I'm going to keep working on my project, because I think my idea was a more long-term solution, and I'm seeing over and over people talking about that. So, with the full, I guess for people who aren't aware of the situation, I need to back this up a little bit more. So, Patreon was like nothing 2 years ago. It was, I mean, granted, it had a couple $1 million invested in it, and because what's Jack Conti or whatever had some kind of reputation. I don't remember what exactly for, but this is not his first platform or his first company that he has started. He had a reputation prior to that, which is why investors were willing to invest in him when he started Patreon. I think it's actually anyway, Patreon started to gain popularity and get a lot of money when the adpocalypse happened. This was around the time where PewDiePie had his big fallout, and then Wall Street Journal hit pieces and people started pulling advertising dollars out of YouTube, and then YouTube overreacted by canceling PewDiePie's channel, and then this was the first major adpocalypse and demonetization rounds, and a lot of people were losing, had become full-time YouTubers were starting to lose their money, and they heard about Patreon, and they're like, oh, this is an alternative, and they started flocking to Patreon. And one of the biggest names at that time was Dave Rubin, who was a member of the Young Turks, and he didn't like that, and he started his own YouTube channel and was making money that way. And then eventually he's like, okay, I can't survive off of ad revenue, and being with the Young Turks, he completely severed ties with them, and he's ventured out on his own. And the only reason he could do that was because of Patreon. Patreon donations from subscribers and things along those lines is what helped him build his studio. It's given he's got a crew. I don't know how many people are working with him on those videos, but he's got an editing crew, and he's got cameramen and stuff like that. He's also got a booking agent. Similar to Steven Crowder, because Steven Crowder's got a whole crew around him that produces episodes. So Dave Rubin, I'm imagining you're talking about a crew of at least 5 people working on that project. And that's not something you can do unless you're making a decent amount of money per month. I don't know what exactly his total is on Patreon, but I'm guessing somewhere above 30,000 through Patreon. Probably more than that. That's 30,000 a month. This is monthly donation. So I know Jordan Peterson, from what people have been talking about, like the analytics, and this was something Tim Pool linked, because there's sources that I guess they track Patreon donations and that sort of thing. It's like a third-party verification thing, and so he linked that for Jordan Peterson, and according to this site, he's making about 80,000 a month through Patreon. I didn't see the one for Dave Rubin. It's not. From my perspective, it's not all that essential to know how much they're making through Patreon to know that Patreon, these people pulling out and pulling away from Patreon, is huge to Patreon's bottom line. So Jordan Peterson was a big name for Patreon. Dave Rubin was a big name for Patreon. And Sam Harris. Sam Harris was apparently number 13 on Patreon's, the top earners through Patreon. Sam Harris is apparently number 13 on that list, and as of Monday, completely deleted his account. He is able to do this because he already had a website set up previously before joining Patreon, I think, if I'm not mistaken. He's got his samharris.org website, which has been around for a while. So deleting his Patreon, he's like, okay, he's just redirecting people to his .org. which is that's that seems to be the trend that a lot of people are actually taking to combat this the Patreon fiasco at the moment. They rather than what a lot of people have been doing is rather than depending on some third party site, just going out and creating their own. This is actually what Lauren Southern did a year ago. When Lauren Southern got kicked off of Patreon, and this is what I was like, okay, for me, that was the last straw. I was like, there's every time people leave one platform, join another platform, that becomes the next platform that gets attacked, and then they get kicked out of there, and they got to keep and they keep going one place or another. And that's why when I was bouncing around what to call my platform, I was like, one of the ideas that I was like, okay, that's what I wanted to call it, Safe Haven or something Haven, because or possibly Last Bastion or something along those lines, because I was like, okay, I want people to think and have it in their mind that this is, once they come here, they don't have to go anywhere else. And that was, but ultimately Funfair won out as the name that best describes what I was trying to build. And I've gone over the name I think on several streams, so I'm not going to bother. If you need a refresher, go ahead and ask, but I'm not. But yeah, so anyway, Lauren Southern started her own website, and that website is dependent entirely on PayPal. PayPal has not cut Lauren Southern off as far as receiving donations through her website, but those payments are processed through PayPal. So PayPal has been severing ties with other platforms, with other websites. So it is, if they so choose, they can stop processing payments for Lauren Southern's site, cut off her funding, and then we no longer get documentaries like Farmland and the one that she's working on, Borderless. What was the other one? The big one that also lost their funding through PayPal is Gab. Gab got cut off from PayPal, and they had to find an alternative payment processor. BitChute also no longer being supported by PayPal. So that is, yeah. 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 Well, they had to shut down due to, because they couldn't afford to keep running. Yeah. So for vid.me, they didn't lose their payment processor. They weren't, they didn't lose, that they weren't shut down by people attacking them. According to Styx Hexenhammer, which I am not 100% sure if his analysis is correct, but his analysis seems to be pretty accurate on most other things. He was saying they shot themselves in the foot because they were following YouTube's. So even though they started out as a free speech, hey, come here instead of going to YouTube, they started promoting the same thing that YouTube was promoting. They started promoting like LGBT content. They started promoting social justice content. It's not, they weren't actively banning conservatives, but they were alienating the audience by focusing on all the stuff that they wanted to have on their website. So it's more of a shadow ban than an outright ban. It's more like that. Yeah, you can be on our site, but we're just going to ignore you for the most part. But according to Styx, when he was talking about this particular thing, he was saying the conservatives were the ones financing vid.me. It was okay, they got shut down on YouTube, and they started flocking to vid.me, started growing that platform. And I guess Styx's analysis of this is a little more on point than most people, because he was one of the top three contributors on vid.me. And it's just the same thing. So when you look at BitChute, Styx Hexenhammer is number one on BitChute. He might have been dethroned by InfoWars, but he was number one on BitChute for the longest time, and then it's, then it's Alex Jones versus Styx Hexenhammer, and that's, so you're talking about very large audiences, and he was one of the largest contributors on vid.me before it went down. And he, according to him, the big problem there is, even though he was the largest one and he was getting, the most subscribers and more people donating to his channel, he was not on the trending for vid.me. You're like, well, if he's your number one draw, it's similar to what YouTube is doing with PewDiePie. PewDiePie is still the largest YouTuber on that platform. He's up to 77 million, and he earned over 5 million of that within the past, was it 3 months? Which is outright like insane. He's earned more than 2 million subscribers within the past month. Yeah. Because part of that is he's in this rivalry with T-Series. Okay, so I got a side tangent about PewDiePie versus T-Series, because this is some of the most amazing things that we have seen on the internet, like, in ever. So PewDiePie is the number one, still number one, and he's one guy in his office doing stupid meme reviews and video game, playthroughs and stuff like that, and he's competing with a conglomerate. He's competing with a company that produces, T-Series is it's a company, and they've got a bunch of musicians producing videos and, flash mob style stuff and ads for movies in India and that sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people claiming that T-Series is using bots. They're bot accounts, because based on the interactions on their channel, you're like, there's no way you have 70 million subscribers or 70 million plus subscribers and you're getting views on your videos in the thousands and comments on your videos in the hundreds, and the likes and dislike ratio, you're like, dude, nobody is watching your stuff. Why are all these people subscribed? So just comparatively, there are channels with much lower, like channels in the low millions, that are competing, at least as far as interactions, with T-Series, and yet T-Series is the second fastest growing channel at the moment, because PewDiePie has, they were the fastest growing for a while, but PewDiePie in the last couple of months has had a rally because there's this subscribe to PewDiePie hashtag that's been going around, and one of the big reasons I wanted to talk about this tangent is I just saw Alex Jones has joined the PewDiePie team. So he had a video where he's talking, and part of the reason I wanted to bring up that PewDiePie is by himself and T-Series is a conglomerate, because Alex Jones, even though he was doing kind of a silly rant, he compared the situation to Ready Player One, and while it's a pretty, I wouldn't say a terrible movie, but pretty mediocre movie, there's a large fan base for the books for Ready Player One. And yeah, it's like the parallels are like, oh, dude, that's actually a really good analogy for this PewDiePie situation, because Ready Player One, it's one person and, a group of his friends and stuff like that, versus this evil conglomerate that, that is trying to take over the platform and that sort of thing. And it's like, oh, huh. Yeah, that is a good parallel to the situation we find ourselves in. Because what has been the rallying point for PewDiePie and why he saw a pretty rapid increase in subscribers over the past couple of weeks is because other major YouTubers have joined hashtag subscribe to PewDiePie. We've seen, and the amount of crowd support has been crazy, because there's been some 13 or 14-year-old kid hacked into a printer network and got the printers to print out hashtag subscribe to PewDiePie. He's had somebody bought the billboard at Times Square to display an ad that just says hashtag subscribe to PewDiePie. And then he's had other contributors like Markiplier, and then the Jake Paul came to PewDiePie's side and was like, yeah, so Jake Paul, and he's like, yeah, he was like, no, it wasn't Jake Paul, it was Logan Paul, because he was talking about the LOL gang is here to support PewDiePie, and he's telling his subscribers to subscribe to PewDiePie, and it just keeps escalating. And then we've had Ben Shapiro was on Meme Review and said subscribe to PewDiePie. What was the more recent one? So there was, yeah. So it's been like Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin did a little video and they released on Twitter where they're saying they're like, yep, subscribe to PewDiePie, and PewDiePie even included that in one of his more recent videos. And he's like, yeah, this is getting out of hand, and he hasn't released anything acknowledging Alex Jones, because this happened just, I mean, you're talking about, this is like 30 minutes before I went live on the stream, maybe an hour ago, before I started, that Alex Jones released this video. So it's, granted, it's Alex Jones, he's doing his crazy thing, it's going to go viral. This is one of his, well, the thing is even though it's Alex Jones, and usually that's a publicity stunt, right? It's because he gets people to watch his other content on InfoWars and that sort of thing, and he kind of rallies around these viral videos as a way of getting to people with the the InfoWars website and all that sort of thing. But this is if PewDiePie starts showing that clip on his own channel and acknowledges that, and vice versa, it's actually ultimately beneficial to both groups. So it's not a just tagging on attention whoring thing like some other people on YouTube that I have criticized, or some other media figures like Laura Loomer and what's her name, the Kate Bennett or something like that. No, what's her? Yeah. Well, and before that, she did the PETA thing with the food, and you're just like, no, stop it. The thing is, those two people seem to me like attention whores, because it's never about promoting someone other than themselves, and that's what I always see. I mean, that's, granted, that might be my perspective of things, but it's the, hey, look at me, It seems more like they want attention, and they're just out for themselves. Whereas, so one of the big things that I've talked about this previously on the stream, PewDiePie has been a force for good, because at least, so even though he's growing his channel and it's kind of like he's treating this as kind of like this silly contest or silly, it's just a joke on the internet, and yet he's like, okay, well, I'm getting all these new subscribers, might as well use that for charity. He's actually given, when he did a live stream where all donations were going towards a charity, and it was like, okay, it's not, he's not just like, oh, I need to be, even though it's getting him attention, it's not just about the attention for himself, and he's actually downplayed and like, dude, yeah, you got, it's a joke, it's a meme, stop subscribing to PewDiePie. He's actually gone out, like, he's actually done multiple videos where he said, no, subscribe to PewDiePie, stop, no more. So it's just kind of a difference in approach, where the people that I would say are kind of attention whores, they're like, oh, people stop talking about me, let me go do something wild and ridiculous to get people talking about me. Whereas everybody else is, these other people, like Alex Jones, he'll come out and say something, but it's relevant to what was going on at the time. But it's also, because like what he's saying about PewDiePie is like, oh, I didn't think about it from that perspective. That's actually adding something to the conversation. And he's telling other people to go subscribe to PewDiePie. He's not saying, oh, subscribe to InfoWars or come to InfoWars. He's promoting someone else other than himself, and that's the mutually beneficial arrangements when you're like, yeah, attention to yourself, so that way you can redirect to somewhere else. That's ultimately more beneficial as far as what's the word I'm looking for? In promoting someone else, that's gonna bring you up in people's viewpoint of you. Whereas if it's all about self-promotion, that actually has the opposite effect. Which another person who's kind of a provocateur along those lines was Milo Yiannopoulos. He's also was a part of the Patreon purge, or most recent Patreon purge, and yet nobody really cares. That's because Milo Yiannopoulos is a bit of an attention whore. It's all about him, and it's all about building his brand. A little bit about promoting, there was very little pointing people towards other causes or other, it was all about Milo Yiannopoulos and building Milo Yiannopoulos' career. So there's very little cross-promotion, although he did, one of the rallies he went to, he did, Lauren Southern was there, and that kind of built her up, at least, or got, that sort of thing. And I guess without him, I wouldn't have found Louder with Crowder. So he's not completely condemnable, but there definitely seems to be more of an air of it's all about me, everybody look at me, attention thing. So which is why people aren't really paying attention. It's like, oh yeah, Sargon got kicked off, and PewDiePie and Milo Yiannopoulos and a whole bunch of other people got kicked off on around the same time frame. But everybody is focusing on Sargon of Akkad because he's not as big as Milo Yiannopoulos. He does not have the same kind of following. He does not. He doesn't have the money, and he doesn't have the same kind of fan base. But Sargon of Akkad has made a reputation of being kind of a moderate. If anything, he is left of center based on some of the stuff he said in his streams. Whereas Milo Yiannopoulos is like, out there kind of. Sargon of Akkad / Carl Benjamin has kind of been the middle of the road kind of guy, and yet he was targeted by. Well, here's the bigger issue that we think we brought this up last week or maybe the week before, talking about how it wasn't even something he had said on Patreon. It is something he had said on a stream that was somebody else's stream. He was just joining it for a little bit, and he said this on there. And the context of it isn't the way that Patreon is trying to describe it. No, Patreon doubled down and released a memo or with the text of what Sargon was saying, and they were implying that it seems painfully obvious what Sargon was doing, given, like, if you read the entire conversation, you're like, oh, he is using their verbiage against them. So he says the N-word, and he's talking about the way they view people when they use that word. Not the way Carl Benjamin uses that word, but the way that they were using it. He also says actually, does YouTube care? I'm just going to say it, faggot. So I know the N-word is YouTube banned, and, YouTube will censor your channel for that, but I don't know about faggot per se, but I said it, whatever. He said that as well, but again, he's using their terminology against them, because it's like, well, so somebody who's on the alt-right or somebody who's, neo-Nazi fascist or whatever, the actual group of racists, in order to insult someone, well, they would call them the N-word, or they would call them the F-word. And he's saying, you guys are everything that you say that you are against. You guys are N-words. You guys are F-words. The only difference between you and them is skin color, but you act exactly the way that you say all of these other people act. It's ludicrous, and I mean, he's basically insulting them, and yet Patreon is looking through that and listening to that and be like, oh, dude, this guy's a racist. And he's like, what? If someone, it's like, he was, those words have no meaning to someone who doesn't see them as pejoratives. Like, if Carl Benjamin was fighting, or was trying to insult Milo Yiannopoulos, he wouldn't call him a faggot, because Milo Yiannopoulos embraces that term. Milo Yiannopoulos uses that term to talk about himself. So if Sargon of Akkad was in a dispute with Milo Yiannopoulos and said, "Oh, Milo Yiannopoulos is nothing but a faggot," well, then you could make these implications about Sargon of Akkad. He's like, "Oh, yeah, he uses that term because he's anti-gay or whatever." And if he said, "Oh, Milo Yiannopoulos, you're just a a white N-word," what is going on with this? Leave me alone. Anyway, if he had used it in the context of that situation, you're like, "Oh, maybe Carl Benjamin does have a little bit of a racist streak or something like that." But it doesn't make any sense that he is insulting a group and he is using what that group detests to, and he's saying, "You guys are that thing." It's, right? So it'd be kind of like Westboro Baptist, right? They've got their signs, God hates faggots and all that sort of thing, Well, what is the biggest insult you could hurl at them? Call them faggots. They're like, "Oh, no, we're not that." They would get all defensive, and that's the idea Benjamin or Carl Benjamin or Sargon of Akkad was using in that particular stream. Is like, well, this is what you hate. I'm holding up a mirror and saying, you are what you hate. He was holding up a mirror to them. And that's apparently what Patreon is viewing as, racist and hate speech and anti-gay. And you're like, you guys are... So either Patreon and Jack Conte or whatever, either they are so stupid they can't realize what is going on based on the context, or they think everybody else is so stupid that they can't figure out what's going on. And Tim Pool, I've been following his stuff because he's been tweeting about this pretty incessantly over the last few days, correctly pointed out this, Patreon doubling down on this doesn't, the regular users and all their normal average, the normies or whatever, don't care about any of this. They look at the situation and they're like, dude, they don't even care who Sargon of Akkad is to begin with, to let alone why Patreon banned him. They are ignoring the situation. The people who do care about this situation are like, no, we know better than what you're trying to tell us, and it's adding fuel to the fire. It was meant to be a PR stunt on Patreons. I'm like, see, we're okay, but the people it was intended to satiate, it's only serving to make them more adamant that Patreon can't be trusted and Patreon has got a political bias. It's only served to divide them more against the audience that they were trying to salvage a relationship with. Because the regular people are going to look at it and be like, oh, whatever, Patreon, we don't care. But it's the people who were like, dude, you guys did wrong by Sargon of Akkad, and then they read over the stuff that Patreon sent about it, and they're like, you guys are absolute morons, or you think we're morons. No, we're not. No, you're not getting our business. We're leaving. Alright, now I've been talking way too much here, but proper terrorists. Oh. Okay. And I got Aircraft Sparky in my Hangout chat. Oh, didn't realize that. So he's saying Sargon's Patreon has been the target for a long time. Patreon has been looking for an excuse. And yeah, that's exactly what has been going on for a lot of people. That's what happened with Lauren Southern. It seems painfully obvious to anybody watching or paying attention is like, yeah, they were looking for an excuse and they took the craziest, why would this ever be, why would this even be an issue for you unless you're actively looking for anything and everything that you can to shut these people, or we found our excuse that we were looking for, right? Because like that's why they came up with the whole term manifest observable behavior. And okay, so let's bring this back to Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin and Sam Harris, because they are members of the intellectual dark web. Kind of cringy, but kind of understandable, because that's a pejorative that someone tried to use against them, and they're like, okay. So they all kind of embraced it. it was meant to be an insult and meant to be like, oh, how dare you, look at these guys, they're members of the intellectual dark web. And it's, yeah, and they're like, okay, we'll take the term, we'll put on that mantle, we'll embrace it. And they actually actively call themselves that, and they form a group and they talk to each other, via hangouts and other means and stuff like that. And it includes people like Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin, Brett Weinstein, what's his brother's name? Is it Sam Weinstein? No. So Brett Weinstein, the Evergreen College guy is Brett. I forget his brother's name. Oh, Eric Weinstein. So they're both members of it. Sam Harris is a member of it. Joe Rogan is also included in that circle. I don't know of anybody else who's included in that. There might be a couple others that I'm not either not aware of or not remembering at the moment. But if you think about that combined group, a lot of them were using Patreon. Ben Shapiro obviously not using Patreon because he's got the Daily Caller, or the Daily Wire, and his leftist tears tumblers. But if you think about the combined fan bases of that group and the amount of money that group has access to, and it may not even be their own money, because I'm saying right now they could finance something on their own, which is what they're planning on doing. They have the ability on the individual level to finance themselves. But more importantly, when they do something, people with money actually pay attention, because Dave Rubin has had Peter Thiel on his program. Peter Thiel is a billionaire, one of the co-founders of PayPal. He is financing cryptocurrency, and he is a libertarian. And you're like, well, somebody like that, you bring them a proposal, something, if you can prove that you've got a business model to someone like that, they're likely to invest in your company. He's got cash out the wazoo. I don't see why he wouldn't, like, oh, hey, Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin are starting a competitor to PayPal. Well, they've got fan bases of, over, the combined total of the IDW, the intellectual dark web guys, you're looking at several million people just by them themselves. And very little, and it's not all overlapping. Sure, there's some overlap, but the crew, or the group of people that follow Sam Harris, like it's not going to be the same fan basis as the people following Ben Shapiro. There's very little overlap between those two fan bases. And then Jordan Peterson is another. So the Venn diagram, yes, there's overlap, but I would say the two extremes of that is going to be Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro. And then Jordan Peterson is going to be a little bit more towards the middle, and then you've got your Weinsteins and Dave Rubin at the middle. But the overlap of that fan basis is not going to be all that much. So there should be about 2 million subscribers that would switch to their platform. Just an instant built-in audience of 2 million people is enough to get your platform like the green light. There are, major companies would kill for, like, wait, you're saying if we start this, we get an instant 2 million customer base? Okay, that would be amazing. So, so if anybody can do this, it's probably going to be that group. That being said, I think they're going to run into the same problems. From what they've said on their stream, it sounds like they're going to do more of the same. Carbon copies of existing systems, which doesn't help. They're going to run into the same problems that Gab ran into. They're going to run into the same problems as Minds. They're going to run into the same problems as... Okay, so this was the other one. This wasn't started 2 years ago, but the other one that just... So after Sargon of Akkad was banned from Patreon, everybody started talking about Subscribestar. And they had a bunch of people move to Subscribestar. Within a week, Subscribestar lost their PayPal as their payment processor. And they're in the process of getting a new one and possibly taking PayPal to court, but odds are they're not going to win that fight. which is very, very odd. And people have talked about this as like PayPal should be held to the same standards as banks, but it's not. Credit cards should be held to the same standards as bank, but they're not. So a financial institute like a bank, like Bank of America, Citibank, and all those sorts of things, cannot stop doing business with someone because of their political ideology. For some reason, credit card companies and PayPal are allowed to do that, and nothing is stopping it. So that, but I mean, that's the complaint people are raising, which means more than likely this is probably going to go to the government, and we're going to see some kind of government oversight, which the people are acting as if that's like I've heard so many people talking about as if that's the only way that this can be handled and resolved, and that's a problem for me. Because that seems to be what Tim Pool is arguing for. It seems to be what a lot of people have been arguing. Like, oh, no, this is, you can't, see, look, you said build your own, and then people moved to Subscribestar, and then Subscribestar got shut down, so this is not possible for any individual civilian or any private company to come up with a solution. Government has to solve this thing. And I'm like, are you... Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and it's not just control over the internet. I mean, they'd have to. It's control over financial institution. What qualifies as a financial institution? Um, that's where you get into very murky waters, and depending on what gets. So let's say in order to like people are trying to pass some kind of law or get government to act to make PayPal do business with whoever, right? They can't keep a website or a particular user from using their platform. Well, that's yeah, great, man. And then PayPal starts acting right according to the law. Well, then they take that law and they start applying it to other industries, and they start applying that to GoFundMe, and they start applying that to Kickstarter, and they start shutting down crowdfunding websites. They start putting the reins and like, oh, look, you guys aren't operating fairly, or you're whatever for whatever reason they can use that law that was intended to stop PayPal. They can start using that to restrict other platforms or to control the behavior of other platforms, which leads to these industries that were growing because they're offering something that consumers desperately need, avenues of ways around existing systems. It's going to restrict people's options. They're going to be locked into using PayPal and using these existing systems, and they won't be allowed to create their own. It's going to result because right now we have a monopoly, and I don't think that monopoly is based on technical difficulties. I think that monopoly is based on people not willing to put their money towards new ventures. And I don't know why that is at the moment. It's a little perplexing to me. And it's something I had not anticipated, and I should have, but because that is what I'm seeing more and more. I thought at this point in time, given how much whining there was about censorship and like, oh, somebody needs to do something, and yet everybody flocks to existing systems, and I'm like, somebody else needs to do something, I guess. That's your viewpoint. You need somebody else to go do it, build all, and finance it all on their own. And then once they're successful, then you'll go and adopt their program. That's what I'm hearing over and over again. Well, no, and so the thing is, what he's proposing and his solution would work, but it is short-sighted because these programs never stick to their lane. They never fit, like, oh, hey, this is to fix that one little area. They never stay there. They always make the problem worse in more areas than what they're supposed to focus on. This is that is they would use, that is their foot in the door to expand control of the internet, which we don't want. This little bit of regulation, oh, it's like, oh, this is just to fix this one thing because people aren't doing it right. Getting that foot in the door is going to lead to government censorship. So if you think Google censorship, and if you think YouTube and Patreon and Twitter censorship is bad, wait till the government becomes the agency censoring. Wait till the government gets a hold of it. If you think private companies is bad, wait till somebody who has no restrictions whatsoever gets a hold of it, and they become the arbiter of what can and or what is and isn't free speech protected. Yeah. Okay. Well, so I'm going to use a big example. So, because what Ham is proposing is like, yes, that might solve the problem right now in the temporary and the interim, and it's going to make problems worse in the long run. And the biggest example I can think of this for this, well, actually, there's a couple, but I'm going to use the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve was initiated because they're like, hey, people keep doing these bank runs, and these banks are going, the banks can't, give everybody their money back, and this is creating a problem. So we need some financial institution that these banks can go to in order to get loans or in order to get money, so that way when somebody does a bank run, they can give everybody their cash, and this stops the bank run because people aren't afraid of losing all their money, keeps these banks afloat. But then the Federal Reserve has led, if you're following the trends, if you're looking at things, led to the Great Depression, led to things like the 2008 financial crisis, led to the dot-com bubble, led to the housing bubble. If you're tracing it back to its origin, it all seems to start with the Fed. And granted, there's debate over this, although there is no debate when it comes to the Great Depression as to what triggered that. And so the Federal Reserve, which was initiated as a solution to bank runs, created the ultimate bank runs on the American population. The way to fix this would have been back when the Federal Reserve was first being proposed as a solution, was to just stop fractional reserve lending. Because that's what's the source of all these bank runs to begin with. These banks were participating in fraud. They were promising all of their customers that they could get their money at any time, while they didn't have enough money in the bank itself to return all people's money at the same time. That's the problem, is they were lying to their customers, which started these bank runs. And they're like, oh, we've got these bank runs, rather than fix the companies, and like, okay, if you have a bank that practices in fractional reserve lending, your bank deserves to fail. Somebody else is going to create a bank that doesn't participate in fractional reserve lending. They're not going to have bank runs. They're not going to have failure. They're going to make money over it. And when your bank fails because you're participating in this fraudulent act, the banks that don't participate in it, they survive. But rather than do that and fix the problem at the time, and just because fractional reserve lending would have been a thing of the past once they realized, oh yeah, we can't keep doing this, and every time we do this, that bank fails. Instead of fixing the problem at the time, they instituted the Federal Reserve as a solution for bank runs, and it's led to huge economic collapses and bubbles that were unheard of previous to that. It's has taken a smaller problem that only affect local communities, and now it turned them into global problems. That's what you're likely to see if we get the government involved in fixing the problem with these tech giants. You're like, oh, hey, let's institute some kind of government oversight committee to make sure to rein in Facebook and Google and YouTube. And then they're going to rein in the entire internet, and then we lose our free speech that way. And it's going to make it worse, because that's the trend. That always happens that way, and then that government institution not likely to go away anytime soon. Yeah, well, he's blaming one idiot's mistake of acts, because like the company so he keeps bringing up that example of the guy who put antifreeze in some kind of medicine, and he keeps using that as if that means something, and I'm like, was it the purpose of this company to, like, oh, I'm going to poison my customers? No. So why are you using that as an example of capitalism killing people? It wasn't the intention, and it wasn't the purpose of the individual or of the company. They weren't actively trying to poison the people. So how can you blame that on a system? It's like, well, because accidents happen in any system. What he's doing is the same thing as what communists are blaming capitalism for people dying of sickness. And I'm like, yeah, that happens. That also happens under communism. It happens more so under communism. And you're like, oh, but look, 200 people died because they got, because somebody put antifreeze in their medicine. And I'm like, yeah, that happened under capitalism. You know what happens under government? Millions of people are dying because there are treatments that have not been approved by the FDA. Or, conversely, treatments that are approved by the FDA that have side effects that are killing people and that later get recalled. And nobody is held responsible for that. How many thousands of people are dying and getting, mesothelioma? How many advertisements do you see a month or a week where they're talking about have you tried this prescription? Well, you could have a court case against this company. And I'm like, those products were approved by your FDA. 200 people were killed or whatever. I'm like, people are dying by the thousands by products that are approved by the FDA. Oh, okay. Well, that's understandable. That's going to happen. I'm like, if it's a problem under both systems, you have to compare which system does it occur less. Under which system does it occur less? If people are dying due to lack of health care under capitalism, well, you have to see, well, are people dying under socialism with less of an access to health care? Oh, by millions. By millions. Also dying of starvation, also dying of other, like, focusing on a single problem is, you're not, by focusing on one little area like Ham tends to do when he's talking about this issue, you're ignoring all of the downsides of the opposite. It's you're focusing on flaws in one system and pretending that your system doesn't have any flaws whatsoever. No, if you're looking at flaws, you have to say, this system has all of these flaws, our system has all of these flaws. Which system between the two has less flaws? And time again, free market capitalism, less flaws compared to any other system that's ever been tried. And yet, well, he said, I'm like, that means you're a socialist. You can claim you're a capitalist or you're pro-capitalism all you want. What you're spouting is socialism. uh, the U.S. has not had a free market system ever since 1913. That's when we adopted a federal income tax and the establishment of the Federal Reserve shortly thereafter. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Plutocracy or oligarchy, both of those are kind of, well, plutocracy I think is a more accurate explanation. So we should stop using corporate capitalism, or corporatism, or corporate capitalism, or crony capitalism, because those imply that it's still capitalism, and you're like, no, not really. It's a separate. So I like plutocracy. It's it's like those people who say democratic socialism. And like, no, that's still socialism. Democratic doesn't change it. But if you say crony capitalism, you're like, oh, that's still capitalism. Cronyism doesn't change it. And like, no, it fundamentally changes it. The cronyism part exists without the capitalism part. So what you really have is cronyism, and when you, which means that the term plutocracy and cronyism, those would be interchangeable. You're like, okay, plutocracy and capitalism, no, those are not interchangeable. So what you have is a system that more accurately described with the term plutocracy. All right, I do want to read Aircraft Sparky's little comments here. So he's got, problem is Google. Yes, Google is one of the huge problems we have here, because they do hold a monopoly. And I do want to specify Google's monopoly on as a search engine and as controlling YouTube and all that sort of thing is not a product of the free market. Google gets government protection for what they provide. Government financing and government protection, which is why competitors have a hard time matching Google. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing is when they've done purges, like it's been proven, not all of those purged accounts were dead, and it's led to weird results in people's subscriber bases and then their channel itself. And they're like, "Oh, well, that was just a problem. That was just a problem." I'm like, yeah, it was a problem that shouldn't have been. If you were just doing what you said you were doing, this shouldn't have occurred. So, uh, all right, yeah, and so, well, yeah, Aircraft Sparky, you can join us if you've got the link to the Hangout, because I see you typing in the chat here, and so I do want to read your comment. So unless a private company invests in their own servers and such, Google will control and who gets to be platformed. Yes and no. Currently, with our current system of relying on the ICANN and relying on search engines the way we are relying on them, that is the case. However, that's not that for the internet to do what the internet does, those systems are not mandatory. With innovations in cloud computing and what's the other net frame? What's the net frame is? I think that's the terminology. Um, yeah. So with cloud computing, net frame, and distributed ledgers, with those three technologies, you can have an encrypted internet that is not reliant on any central point, and you don't need a Google to facilitate network traffic or to help you find a website. That's the future of the internet. The problem is getting from where we are right now to getting there. And that's what most people don't quite understand when they're looking at this problem, is they're looking at the way things are, which leads to carbon copies of existing systems. And if you're like, well, PayPal, it didn't get to where it is by being a carbon copy of another system. It got to where it was by doing something innovative, like something that wasn't being done by anybody else. I said innovative weird, didn't I? By doing something innovative. No? I don't know. It just sounds weird in my head. It sounded weird in my head, but yeah, and S-Man says to check your DMs. I think he sent you the link to the Hangout if you want to join so we can react a little more timely to what you've posted, because I'm really bad at reading comments, if you can't tell. Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. And well, the Article 13 is not in the U.S. That's in the EU, but it was voted in by the elected officials, so that's absolutely democratic according to the right. People voted for elected officials. Elected officials voted for Article 13. That's that's democracy. I, that's the problem with democracy. Yes. That's the idea behind the United States being a democratic republic, because it needs to be indirect. The republic portion of that is government by the people, where we elect officials to act in our stead, and we elect those officials through the democratic process. So that's indirect democracy, because once those officials are in, we're not voting for every single thing that they do. A direct democracy would be, okay, this is what we're voting for. Referendums are direct democracy, right? If like, I don't think our constitutional actually allows for that. Although state constitutions do, where they have like the voting for, Proposition B, vote for. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Well, or that's why, just be like, hey, how about you control your people, and then we'll stay over here on our side, and you don't make rules for you, and we don't make rules. Yeah, you don't make rules for us, and we don't make rules for you guys. That's why I'm like, okay, that falls under anarcho-capitalism. Like, hey, I'm gonna make rules for me and my group. You guys stay over there, and you guys don't make rules for us, and you don't impose stuff over us. And if you want to work with us, we'll work with you. But you don't get to determine what we do. uh, yeah, would you be in favor of going back to the original purpose of the Senate as opposed to what it is right now, or the original way that senators were elected, or I should say appointed? Uh, mm-hmm. Yeah, I was looking, trying to remember the number. It's 17th Amendment. That's what changed. Yeah, that's what changed it. So where senators are popular, direct popular vote, as opposed to being appointed by the governors of their states. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The states, some individual states had different processes. Some were just appointed by their governors. Some were elected by their state senate. Either way, it was the individual states who chose who went to the senate, as opposed to the populace directly voting them. So yeah, they were appointed by the existing elected government, which that to me, I would prefer we go back to that, because that seems, because then you actually have a House and a Senate that keep each other in check, as opposed to what we have right now, where it's like, what's the real difference between the House and the Senate? But well, yeah, any new bill has to start in the House of Representatives, but it doesn't quite make sense, because the purpose of the Senate was to keep was to keep the state's interest first when it's coming to whether a bill is adopted or voted and passed through, whereas the House of Representatives was more of the, okay, the will of the people as a whole. And so it creates that they're keeping each other in check. It's like, okay, in order for something to actually pass through, not only does it have to be the people saying, hey, this is what we want, but it also has to be the the state representative saying, okay, yeah, this is something we also want. So it's good for the state, and it's good for the people of the United States as a whole, because the House of Representatives it's the representation of the United States populace. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's because it's how things are divided up as opposed to. So even though the entire state would have more popular votes for a particular senator or representatives, it's like, well, because of the way that the district lines are drawn, yeah. Well, this other person ended up win, or this other candidate won more within those particular districts. So. Mm-hmm. and and you want it to be undemocratic ultimately. And so even though I'm like, okay, so on the individual state basis, even though a particular candidate may have won the popular vote, they end up losing the actual or whatever they needed in order to be a senator or a representative or that sort of thing because of district lines and all that sort of thing. That falls in line with a similar idea behind the need for an electoral college, because sometimes you don't want the whoever is being in charge based on what the pot what's what the most people want, right? Because then that's ignoring the minorities, or that's ignoring the smaller communities and what they want. It's. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and they just get ignored, and then right, because it's this, right, it's that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, or I guess maybe that's not quite right, but I don't think maybe that's not quite right in this situation, but politicians focus on specific the key states, or what it's um yeah, the swing states is the way that they're said, and everything else is flyover, and oh, you guys aren't don't matter because you guys are in the back. um but what it means is that those particular states, not only do they get more attention, but they also get more sway when it comes to what is enacted. Like, oh, hey, if you want the votes of the people in this state, you have to appeal to these things, and it gives them more of a say in what a politician actually promises, and whether they deliver on that or not is another bag of worms. But it at least leads to whatever they promise to is whatever is going to appeal to the people of those particular states. like, yeah, and I get the idea behind a ranked voting system, but that seems like it would lead to more people not getting what they want. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wait, wait, wait. So all of the votes from C go to candidate B? Okay. Okay, so you're saying okay, so say my first vote was for Gary Johnson and then Trump and then Hillary. What would happen is if well Gary Johnson didn't have a chance, so his votes all of his votes are eliminated, and so then for you, since you put him as number one, that vote goes to Trump. But if somebody else was like Hillary, Trump, Johnson, Johnson's vote gets eliminated. Well, instead that would go to Hillary, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense then. Uh, yeah, because I was under the impression that with a ranked voting system is basically you'd rank three people, and then if they, so you give those three ranks, and it's like okay, well this person the number one vote was kind of split 50-50. So half the people voted for, candidate A, half of them voted for candidate B, and then candidate C, well, even though he wasn't anybody's first or second pick, he still got more votes overall because he was always second or third, whereas sometimes candidate A was people's third for half the time and candidate B was people's third for half the time, but candidate C just kind of coasted in the middle in the bottom. So they would ultimately get more votes overall instead of being on the extremes. They floated that moderate and ended up barely squeaking out a win. But what you're saying is, yeah, the way that you're describing it, that would be a better. Because I do know some governments, they do have that process, and you're like, dude, that means you're gonna get the guy that most people didn't want as their first pick because the moderate position is gonna end up being the majority more often than not. Yeah, the first past the post I think is more what I was thinking. But yeah, the way that you described ranked voting, that seems to be a more fair system. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the gerrymandering thing is always going to be an issue, but you can't remove that because populations shift. So you have to have the ability to redraw those district lines, but it's that leads to people redrawing them in ways that favor their political party. That's but you can't, because you could have a district with like 3 people in it because of the populations moved outside of the district line because work or drought or something, and then you've got 3 people deciding. Like you don't want a small population being the ones to decide the outcome of an election just because, oh well, they're in this big district that everybody moved out of. Yeah. Well, generally they separate the district, and there are restrictions on, because they're trying to get a pretty equivalent population per district. But what that leads to is them drawing weird shaped districts that are all over the place, because it's like, well, it's got the population we need, but they drew it in such ways like, well, these areas of this district tend to vote, and so if we draw the line like this, that's going to give us an advantage in this area, and then but then like and then we got to redraw these other districts to kind of work around that. It's and like, well, all of them have an equal population. It's like, yeah, but all your districts are all over the place. You could have easily divided, like, well, this population, okay, well, right here we've got a population of this, and just a straight line down the state. That would make more sense if they just drew these. Okay, everybody on this side of the line, okay, that's the population size we're needing, and we're just gonna keep separating these little chunks into. But they don't do that. They draw weird, all over the place district lines. Um, but again, that's on a state by state basis. What is the requirements when redrawing those lines? And that's not a federal. That's not something we can do in a federal issue, because the federal issue has these states, their borders are locked in. You can't redraw the state district line, or the lines dividing a state. At least not any time within the past 100 years or so. Or at least not that I can remember. When was the last time we redrew state lines? California and Mexico? Or California and Texas? No, no, not redistricts. I'm talking about the individual states, like the borders of states. That hasn't been done in almost, yeah, I, yeah. I was like, since the adoption of California and Texas and all of that, right? That was the last time they redrew state borders. Well, yeah, because there's more of a fair, like, okay, my vote may not ultimately matter in the long run, but at least the candidate, if I vote my candidate, or it's more likely that my first or second pick will win. Yeah. Yes. So that it would be, because you wouldn't have um the Republicans candidate for it, and the Democrats candidate, and the independent parties candidate, and no, it'd just be like, hey, all the candidates join together. There is no Republican candidate groups that goes through their process of eliminating candidates. It's like, no, everybody joins in at the same time, and we just go through rounds of voting of everybody until we whittle it down to the point, and then we do the ranked vote. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I also think we're missing something in the overall voting system. I mean, this is not just the United States. This is like, voting populations across the globe. So they're not including the vote of the people who didn't bother to show up. That's something that should be included. Like, well, like you got 25% of the vote and she got 25% of the vote, but there's still 50 people who didn't bother at all. That's still the majority. In order for either of you to get the nomination, you gotta win. You gotta win over those non-voters. Hmm? Oh, the Spider Verse. The is it good? Well, probably. Well, and probably not because it seems like he liked it, and he tends to make reviews of things that he's like, complaining. Oh, okay, gotcha. Hmm. Yeah, but but if you compare, if you take that non-voting population, it still is like, well, even if it's like 49%, it's like, well, Trump got half of the people that did vote, so he got what, like 26% of the population, but there's still 49% of the population that didn't want Trump. So I would think that they would have to keep revoting until the majority of vote totals, including those who didn't vote and those who did vote. That means, okay, you've got the majority of the country that want you. There's 25% didn't want you, 25% wanted the Hillary, and then 50% wanted you. Or it might work out something like 33% of the country wanted Trump, and then well, actually it'd have to be 34%. Right, 34% of the country wanted Trump, 32% wanted Hillary, and then 31% didn't vote at all. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I would. That sounds like that would be a better method overall. But that is determined on a state by state basis, whereas the the way the operations of the federal government was determined by the Constitution, whereas each state gets to dictate and manipulate its own constitution, which means they get to set up how their governors and stuff is elected. And so we get this, or we can make changes to the Constitution, but through the process of amendments and things like that, to get some of the some of the things that you're talking about as far as the voting process. That's something we would get a say, but we wouldn't get a say in how California does their governor elections. Because I don't live in California, I would get a say in what happens in the government of Missouri, how we would pick our governor. But as a Missouri citizen, I couldn't dictate North Dakota, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that was pretty good too. Oh yeah. Well, but the whole straw ban sounds like a parody, and that's apparently legitimate. Oh, you're gonna uh, so. And so when the tax collector comes around, they're just like, "Oh, you're a dude. You're definitely paying the masturbation tax. No, don't even try to tell me you don't." like, yeah. How does anybody ever not pay that tax? That's like, God, oh, you're. Yeah, I don't really want to touch this guy's money. Anyway, all right. So we've gone way off topic, but so the because we're talking about government solutions to uh let's see, what's the word. Yeah, we're talking about Patreon and Google and all that sort of thing, but the idea came across as, well, this means we need to get the government to come in and get them to stop censoring people. And I'm like, well, that leads to all kinds of other problems. It's yeah, that might. Yeah, it's the band-aid on a problem that ends up being, and then then that creates more problems, and we got to put band-aids on the band-aids, and then that creates even more problems. So now we got band-aids on band-aids on band-aids on band-aids, and if we'd have just fixed the problem at the root, we wouldn't need all these extra fixes on fixes. And mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's not just government funding, so they do receive that. Even if you cut that off, there are still government tax breaks and incentives that Google has over its competitors. So it's the not just it's giving them money, it's giving them unfair advantages in so many different areas, which a new competitor couldn't have. Well, but Well, I would say, yeah. Hey, yeah, PewDiePie, you're not abiding by the from each according to their ability, to each according to their needs, and I need your money more than you do. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and it's not fair that PewDiePie has 77 million and I only have 120. 120. I wanted to add 1,000 to that, but I can't. It's just I only have 120. It's so sad. Ah, yeah. It's like so PewDiePie needs to split the difference there. I need a couple million from him. You know, forget the T series and PewDiePie controversy. What about the HUMANE Mind versus PewDiePie, huh? Where's the Yes. Yep. It is so Sam Harris, that is at least six figures a month that Patreon is losing or just lost when he left. At least six figures a month. Wait, what? Oh, so you're saying the audio from all right, okay. So I got a message in the chat. All right, so you're saying that the Hangout stream is not coming across at all? It says the so they said that they can't hear what Loudmouth is saying, by the way, but you've been hearing S-Man speak, right? Because I no. You guys are on the Hangout. I'm asking people, somebody watching the stream, if that audio has been coming through. I might, because it might not be set up correctly. Um, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, but and that was part of the Alex Jones video that came up earlier today, which is He says subscribe to PewDiePie and ends it with a link to his channel, and it ends the stream, or it ends his video with the PewDiePie's bitch lasagnas. Oh. Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. Anyway, so I think we've okay. So I do have one so somebody is gonna join the hangout here in a bit. I don't know if it'll be this particular hangout. So I'm gonna be debating somebody about socialism, because there was somebody posted something on Twitter. Is Bastiat something? I don't know if it was yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna actually send him the hangout for this, and and it's up to you if you want to keep the stream going on your end or not, because I'm actually gonna start this as a secondary stream on mine, because I want the first stream to kind of be about the Patreon and all that sort of thing. So, so I said at 6 o'clock. So once he joins in, I will switch over and we'll start talking about the differences between capitalism and all that. But hopefully he'll give me a couple minutes here, because there's a couple of points we didn't touch on. Because Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin, Sam Harris, and possibly a bunch of the other people are planning their own platform. Because I have discussed that, but from what it sounds, there's not very many details. But the issue that I think they're going to run into is they're going to rely on somebody else to process their payments, which means that somebody else can cut them off and then cripple their platform. And this is why, a year ago when I was trying to come up with a solution for all of this, I was like, okay, this is why it has to be a payment platform first. It can't just be a social media platform. It can't just be, a subscription platform, because those are a dime a dozen. That people set those up all the time, and they set them up. You can set those up within an hour or with a day. Actually, Wix and WordPress and things like that have tools built in for you to create a website and set up a subscription service, or have a way for people to contribute financially to your project. And they're using plugins for PayPal, and they're using plugins for Stripe, and they're using existing APIs to do that. Those you can set up in a day, which is exactly what Maker Support did. That site came up in a day because it was built on Wix. It was, or it might have been WordPress. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember at the moment. But it was built relatively quickly using one of these web applications that already built. And I'm like, if you're going to create a solution to this problem, you can't just use the existing tools that are out there. Because if it was as easy as that, it would have been done by now. If it was as easy as creating a website using WordPress and then just slapping your name on it, if it was that easy, it would have been done already. That it doesn't. The mindset behind we'll just make a carbon copy of Patreon and then then start printing money. It doesn't work like that. You have to have something that innovates, that is something not being provided anywhere else. And so when I was looking at it, I was like, okay, if I want an actual solution to this, it has to be a payment processor to begin with, which means it has to be competing with the likes of PayPal, Stripe, what was the other one? Square, and I think those are the three main payment processors. So it has to compete with them first. But it can't just do, hey, we're like PayPal, only not. So it's like, okay, it has to do something unique that no other payment provider is doing. You're like, okay, well, the first thing you can do is you can offer a lower price for your services compared to everybody else. Okay, that gets you started. But that's not enough of an incentive to get people to move over. So what else can you do? Well, if you're following the model of Bitcoin, the way Bitcoin started getting more people involved and more people involved was rewarding people for their processing power, for the miners, right? You're like, okay, if you mine for however much and you're increasing the strength of our network and you're increasing uh, the stability of our network, we're going to reward you financially. And I'm like, well, my particular network doesn't need miners. The solution that I have found doesn't require that the same way blockchain does. So rather than rewarding miners on our system for using their processing power, I could just reward system. I could just take a percentage of transactions and then reward participants on the system, like any of them. Just, hey, you are involved in the system. Here, you get a chance to win money. And I'm like, okay, that's something nobody else is doing. Nobody else is rewarding, nobody else is saying, okay, we're going to take a percentage of everything that happens on the network, and part of that percentage is going to be randomly redistributed to the network. That's something that my platform would do that is unique. Well, the other thing is, I think I am in a unique position when it comes to this sort of thing, because not only do I have programming experience. Yeah, there's millions of us that have that sort of thing. But okay, so Charlie just sent me a message. He'll be on here shortly. But the particular distributed ledger that I have built into my platform is something that very few people know about. It's something that did not exist. It was, let's see, the white paper on it actually came out in 2015, but the actual platform didn't exist until 2016. So this is something that could not have happened. It was not possible prior to 2016 to begin with. The other thing is the amount of people who are actually aware of this particular platform. Like when I was first researching this last year, at the end of 2017, the number of people who were even aware of it to begin with was in the hundreds of thousands. Now, a year later, maybe 2 million people are even aware that this exists as an alternative or as a distributed ledger. This is still on the ground floor. And if you compare that to Bitcoin, the white paper, was it 2009? Yeah, I gotta double check that. Yeah, when was that? The date on that, I believe, is either 2008 or 2009. But it was a while ago. So let's say 2009. I don't know if that's the exact date. I'm not gonna bother wasting more time because I do have that secondary stream to get to with where I'll be debating Mr. Green. But Bitcoin started at least in 2009, at least as like the white paper came out, and then the actual network was built, and then people started trading it. It took 4 years before that started to take off. So it was in 2012 and 2013 is where it actually started taking off. This other distributed ledger, it's still on that. Prior to 2012, Bitcoin was trading for, was it less than $10 per coin? Something crazy small like that. So this is long before it had been adopted. And then in 2000, at the end of 2012 and in 2013, that's when mainstream media started talking about it, because they'd seen this, the rapid expansion in the network and in the value of Bitcoin, and that's when everybody else started hopping on. And again, people that hopped in when Bitcoin was selling for $200 each were still early adopters. That is 5 years after its initial announcement and its launch. And I'm saying this particular distributed ledger that I'm looking at, it hasn't even hit the 3-year mark yet. So the number of people who are aware of it and the number of people who are even aware of it to begin with is very, very small. But from what I've seen of people doing interviews and talking about it, I'm like, you guys don't see the potential here. You guys are talking about what the actual creators of it have specified and you're just repeating their talking points. I'm like, You guys don't seem to understand how amazing this advancement in technology is. And I'm going to. So, what Bitcoin can do is pretty amazing. You know, sending transfers across the world. You don't need to know who the other person is to send them money. You can do this across the globe at very minimal costs comparatively to other systems, and it is the most secure network we've ever had. So it's, despite bank transfer systems being extremely secure, they're not going to outcompete the Bitcoin network when it comes to security. The problem is Bitcoin network, in order to ensure that security, is extremely slow. They are limited. Technically, it'll be 7 to 8 transactions per second, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say 10 transactions per second. This is all blockchains. This includes Ethereum. They are all limited by this same thing. They cannot do more than 10 transactions per second. It's just not physically possible because that is a built-in limitation into the blockchain. If it goes faster than that, then you have too many splits and the system loses its integrity. You can't tell. There is no consensus. The integrity of Bitcoin depends on everybody on the network agreeing, yes, that is what happened. Now, if there are 5 splits within a second, nobody knows for sure what happened, and you lose that agreement on, yes, this is what happened. Now, what happens right now is Bitcoin, it's built the blockchain, so it's building a block and a block and a block, and say there's a split. We're like, well, he says this happened, you say this happened. Well, if that goes on, continuing to split, then each of those splits is going to have a split, and then each of those splits is going to have a split. So what blockchain does is, to alleviate this, it says, okay, there's a split. Okay, we're going to slow down network traffic. We're going to see which one of these grows faster. Whichever one grows faster, we sever the slower one, and that becomes the new foundation for the block. So there's only one chain going up anymore. The split's gone. We cut off the extra branch. And then then it'll split again, and then you'll see this side's getting longer. Okay, we cut off the shorter branch. That becomes the main trunk. It does this repeatedly throughout the process. But in order to do that, you can't have more than a certain amount of transactions per second, because then you get branching, and then you're like, which one is the shortest branch? Who the hell knows at this point? So it has to throttle it. So this new distributed ledger does not have that problem. And where Bitcoin is limited to at most 10 transactions per second, this other distributed ledger, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are limited on what they can actually send because they're limited on the amount of information that can be sent per transaction and the number of transactions per second. What this other distributed ledger allows for is you're not limited to sending, oh, well, I'm just sending money back and forth. I'm just sending a couple of digits or whatever, or bits back and forth. If you're saying you've got a platform that has the same level of security and is what is 100,000 and is 10,000 times faster, you can send streaming video. You can send, instead of just sending a bit or a byte or a hash, you can send like 4K video as part of your transaction, and the network can handle that. And it's not, if you try to send a streaming video across the Bitcoin network or across any blockchain, you are going to be the only thing that you're going to bottleneck the entire system as it tries to. I was like, oh, it's got to break the video down into individual parts, and then, okay, 10 at a time. You're back to dial-up speeds. At that point, you're talking about, even though you're sending megabytes of data at a time, it's still, you're going to be downloading your video overnight as opposed to streaming it instantly. But with this other distributed ledger that I've been looking at, and I was like, okay, that provided the solution I was looking for my system. You're talking about, I can stream videos, and not just one video, I can stream thousands of videos per second, and it doesn't slow down the network. And then when you introduce sharding and all that sort of thing, this network just becomes, like the amount of information that can cross over it securely is it's insane, the amount of power behind such a network. It's but and so what Aircraft Sparky was talking about is like you'd have to buy servers in order to compete with Google. Well, the one of the beauties of peer-to-peer networks, which ultimately a blockchain is a secure peer-to-peer network. The amazing part of that is every person who joins a peer-to-peer network adds to the computing power of that network and adds to the database storage of that network. So where, yes, if you were an individual company and you were trying to compete with Google, yes, you would have to buy warehouses full of computers and full of server racks in order to compete with what YouTube can offer. But if you have a network where every individual computer who joins that network becomes a part of it, and now you're using their processing power and their database space for your network, you don't need to purchase warehouses because you have a decentralized processor. Every new computer who joins and starts using your system, they become a part of your system, and now they grow the size of it. Like I don't know if you've seen this with the PlayStation 3 started this folding at home. And this is where I'm going to end with a final thought. The folding at home became the largest decentralized processor in the world. And it was mostly because of PlayStation 3's involvement in this. And so basically you have these PlayStation 3s, and all you have to do is you leave them connected to the internet, and you start this folding at home program, and then you walk away. And you're not playing a video game on your PlayStation 3 at the moment. So it creates this large supercomputer that is separated over the internet. And it's the largest processor we have ever had. Now imagine that you don't have to turn folding at home on in order to participate in such a system. Just by joining a website or logging into your account, it's like, okay, well now you are a part of this network of the largest processor ever. We can start computing all kinds of information, and as long as you're saying, okay, as long as I logged in for 5 minutes a day, I'm participating in this network and adding my processor's power to that, adding my database to it, and then you're like, okay, well now I'm getting ready to log off. Well, the system's like, okay, bye, let's take anything that was being done by your computer, we'll take it back to add it to the network. It means what it leads to is every person contributing, or every person who's using the system is contributing to the system. And when they leave, nothing is lost because now we no longer have one other person using the system. It creates a infinitely scalable system, whereas YouTube does not have an infinitely scalable system. And just the power behind that is unfathomable. And you're talking about once you introduce compression rates and all that sort of thing, you can track every bit of information on such a network and have every bit of information on that network broadcast to everybody. So that way, it's the amount of publicly available information at that point is insane. But that's the kind of revolutionary system that I'm looking at this and I'm like, why are all of you guys doing the status quo? You're copying and pasting systems that already exist. We have advanced, and those systems are based on technologies that are 10 to 20 years old. Distributed ledgers, peer-to-peer advancements, frame networks, those are all technologies within the last 10 years. So these systems wouldn't have been possible when YouTube was first developed. They wouldn't have been possible when PayPal was launched. That wouldn't have been possible when Patreon was launched. But they're possible now. And those are the technologies that new social media platforms need to be built on in order to ensure freedom of speech and in order to ensure that people cannot have their payment cannot have their monetization removed. That's what I'm... Oh, sorry, what? Oh. Okay, saying Oh, I just got so okay, my thought is that's the type of, like, I've been trying to get a hold of anyone and everyone with this idea, and so far I've only had so the guy from Freedom Tunes has said, yeah, whenever you get this, whenever you have something to show, come on, I will help you launch the platform. I've had Mr. Dapperton give me the same kind of thing, and I've had Matt Christensen and Rebecca from Beauty and the Beta say that they would. Other than that, the amount of people who are even aware of what I've been talking about for over a year, less than 25 people total. That's what I started. I started looking at all the people who've contributed to my GoFundMe, all the people who've responded to my Twitter. Less than 25 people are even aware that I'm building Funfair. Or have acknowledged that I'm building it. I no. So what you're talking about, yeah, you kind of cut off a little bit there, but I think I understand the general gist of the question. And apparently, my audio has not been working this entire time. Dang it. Um, yeah, so I will have to mirror your copy because nobody else is hearing what you're they're hearing what I say instead of what both of us are saying. So he's talking about Sargon, and that's actually what Sargon has done. Sargon had moved to Subscribestar. People like Styx Hexenhammer had moved to Subscribestar, and then Subscribestar lost their ability to process payments through PayPal, and they have ended all. They've terminated all. You cannot subscribe to new people through Subscribestar. You cannot give any money, and they have stopped processing payments completely, which is actually a it's actually a positive, and it shows that they're actually trusting, at least a little more trustworthy than, say, Maker Support and stuff like that. So Sargon has created his own website and is receiving donations through that website. That is what he has moved into, and I think Styx may have done the same thing. Now, the problem with those sorts of things is a fracturing of communities. Now, that will work for Sargon, and PayPal will have no problem with that. Because what that means is a system like that, the people who are going to join and contribute and give to Sargon are the people who are already aware of Sargon. He is going to be preaching to the choir. No, so if you're talking about payment processing and things like that, but okay, so if you're so as far as getting as far as getting new fans, yes, that is the YouTube thing. Although people are getting kicked off of YouTube, so this is that hasn't happened. Well, it has happened to Sargon. He's gotten his channels shut down on several occasions, which that's why he's like, yeah, his channel has had strikes against it where he hasn't been able to stream. He has lost his channel has been taken down for days, and then YouTube's like, oh no, it's back up. See, that was just a mistake on our part. And he's like, yeah, but it's been Jordan Peterson has had the same thing happen on YouTube. I think the only one who I haven't seen that happen to has been Dave Rubin so far. But that well, yeah. Well, see, I know. So what Sargon, the individual website, is a replacement to Patreon. I understand that, but it's not a replacement for censorship. It's not a replacement for a social media site um, that will not go the way of Twitter and YouTube and Patreon. So so it yeah. that's not where somebody yeah it's not where somebody's going to reach a new audience, and that means Sargon, in order to grow his audience, has to use YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, which to me, a lot of people are okay with and content with doing that, and I'm like, I want to get off of these platforms as soon as possible because they have shown, yeah, yeah, because well, they have shown they are not acting in our best interest and in their long term best interest. Yeah, Nassar, yeah, Koten, if you, yeah, he was permanently banned from Twitter, so he no longer has that outlet to grow his audience. All right. No, it's yeah, that's pretty funny. And then his alt account also got banned for Sargon from Twitter. He had so after his main account, he came back with an alt account, and then that had been up for a couple. It had been up for about a year, I think, maybe longer. He wasn't as inflammatory on that account, and it was a little more low key, but that has also been banned now. He is banned permanently from Twitter, and I think this time it might be an ISP ban or a something along those lines. So, but last I saw, not underscore Sargon's what I'm talking about. Last I saw, that was taken down as well. Oh, okay, okay. Maybe that was just a temporary ban instead of a permanent ban. Um, okay. It was an older account. He started actively using it when his primary went down, but he's been using it a little more low key because yeah. Okay. All right. What I'm looking for is, because I don't want YouTube to get any more money, because I don't want, Google, if they can't handle it, and Facebook, if they can't handle it, being in this position of power and then not using it to, in a corrupt way to silence or to, to control the opposition or whatever, then we need a platform that is completely independent where somebody can grow their brand and spread their message and also earn an income without relying on these other platforms for that purpose. Well, that's what I was saying is like, no, with a distributed network, like what I no, with a distributed network, you don't need that, because the larger the network grows, the more powerful it becomes, and it can compete with the likes of YouTube as far as computing power and storage capability. That's that is something you can definitely build towards on a um, without you could actually decentralize YouTube because of the technologies that have advanced in the, and just like I said, that's technologies that were not even possible prior to 2016, I would say. That's something that wasn't possible until 2016. Maybe 2015, but yeah, because these are not just revolutionary, not just increases in hardware. These are increases in mathematical possibilities, which were not in place prior to 2015, and it's so in like what like this is a platform that I want to tell people about because it's so ingenious and amazing, and it makes you wonder, how did people not come up with this sooner? Because this has been a problem that people have been struggling with since the 80s, or possibly earlier, but at least it goes back to at least the 80s when people are just or were first building communication networks between computers. This was something that like, oh, there has to be a solution to this problem, but mathematically it's possible to do something better and more secure, but we don't know how to do that. And in 2016 somebody cracked it, and it's so, you're like, oh, it's so obvious now, but, and you're like, you look back, it is, it's absolutely ingenious, and it is a revolution in technology and what is possible with computers. And it allows for these large mega corporations to operate on a decentralized level. And that's something, once that, like, and that's, I'm like, I'm so frustrated at the moment. I don't know if you've been seeing me on Twitter and on YouTube, and I've been commenting to Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson. I've contacted them via email, trying to reach out to them in any way possible. I don't know if there's any other way to contact, if you know of any way to reach out to them. I've reached out to them on Patreon, reached out to them on the YouTube comments of those videos, reached out to them via personal emails, but they've got so many people bombarding them. I get lost in the shuffle. And that's what I said. It's like, okay, of the people who directly have acknowledged that I'm working on Funfair, less than 25, and I've been talking about this for over a year, and unfortunately I've hit the roadblock of I cannot finance it myself. I cannot pay for the things that I need, because I need dedicated hardware. I need a dedicated internet line capable of handling a large amount of bandwidth and internet traffic. I cannot do that from my home office. It's not physically possible. And I could launch this program, and if I did, I would be losing money every month it was up. Because I could run it from my personal computer, and I could not handle the network or the network size that it would be required for it to be profitable. In order to do that, I need a T1 business line, which means I need an office, a dedicated office space, with a dedicated T1 line, with dedicated hardware in it to even start the network. And then I would have to have a minimum of several 100,000 users in order to make the platform sustainable. I mean, 100,000... Yeah. With 100,000 users is not unfathomable, considering how fast these other networks have grown. When you look at the size of Minds, when you look at the size of Patreon and how fast they grew in their first year. But every single one of those had investors. I cannot do anything without investors. I have... Yeah. No, I've at the point that I am at, I have, unless something happens in the next couple of weeks, I have abandoned I am going to abandon my idea for Funfair, because it's a bummer. I have invested tens of thousands. Well, I've invested over 15,000 into this business alone. Which is, and over a year's worth of work, and I have to abandon it because I can't even put my foot in the door without a minimum, well, it's going to be a minimum of 10 to 11,000, but in the 10,000 range. And I've developed partnerships, so this is other, the Bitcoin Galaxy guys, but after dealing with them over email and via Skype, they don't seem serious. And when I'm looking at what their actual contributions, they said, oh, we'll help you raise up to $10,000. I'm like, finally. But what they're going to give me is their cryptocurrency, which is built on Ethereum, which you can turn out a cryptocurrency in 2 hours. You can go and create a new cryptocurrency. Oh, it costs me 2 hours. And my cryptocurrency is worth 0.00005 cents. And the amount that they're giving me, I'm like, dude, you're giving me 50 cents worth of stuff, And you're like, well, once it grows in value to be up to 10,000, then we've fulfilled our part of it. I'm like, go F yourself. Like, yeah, that was kind of the last straw. I'm like, you guys kind of promised me something, and you were making all these lofty goals. I'm like, okay, finally I have somebody interested in investing. And what's your investment contribution? 50 cents? And 2 hours of your time? That's what you're adding to this situation. Yeah, and the people behind Bitcoin Galaxy and Red Pill Coin, you can go F yourself. Like that. I don't know how many people. From what I understand, it's only like 2 people that I've ever actually talked to. Yeah. Yeah. Red Pill. Yeah. It's well, they had a website, and they had a I mean, not it's not just hey, they have a website. No, they had a bunch of links to other organizations. They had a lot of support from other. So I investigated the company when I was looking into them, but the value of their currency and their crypto is nothing, and the amount of investment that they are giving to other creators is nothing. It's all promise and no substance. So yeah, you can. I could go around and well, yeah, the other thing was Bitcoin Galaxy, which was taken off a little bit. I'm like, but I could go and create my own cryptocurrency and then just start saying, hey, if you guys, I just start handing out hundreds of thousands of the coin and saying, well, if I give you these coins, you know what, they're gonna go up in value, and when they do, you owe me something in return. And I'm like, but what does that cost me? Little to nothing. That's and if the coins do go up in value, oh no, I lost what cost me originally 50 cents. So even if they do increase to the value of 10,000 per coin, what have I actually lost? Nothing. And meanwhile, I'm sitting on several millions of the coins. So hey, you helped me raise the value of my coins, and now I can turn around and sell them for way more than what they used to be worth. That's what those platforms are built around. And I understand, and I'm not saying that is a negative thing to do, but I'm saying is they're trying to compare their contribution to this to the hours of my life that I have wasted on this, and I'm at the position where I was like, I have to give up and abandon it. From what I could understand, my idea is technically sound. I have not seen anybody in the technical sphere that I've presented this to tell me why it wasn't technically possible. All of them say, oh, that's not possible because Google owns everything, or it's not possible because, oh, you're competing with these big. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. You have to understand, if it's technically possible and I have a financer, this is doable. But it would work. I haven't seen any reason why it wouldn't, other than that, oh, well, they'll shut you down. I'm like, but they can't. They cannot. Right now, the federal government of the U.S. and the government of China cannot shut down the Bitcoin network because it's built on a distributed ledger. That's the type of thing. I'm like, once I get this started, they can't stop it. And especially once I go to a net framework, right? I think that's the terminology for it. Once you go to that, they can't even remove your host. Your network is independent of the ICANN. And actually, once you get to that, that's the bizarre thing. Once you get to the point where your network is dictating the terms of how people connect to it, then you can go ahead and you can recode all of the protocols that go into the network. So you're saying, like, you can have communications over a network where every person on the network can communicate with each other, and no one else can determine what you guys are talking about, because you're communicating in a completely encrypted and uncrackable way, because you don't even have to communicate over the existing lines that are there. Once you created a connection between two machines, and they're connecting on this, they get to dictate the terms, and they're like, hey, we're talking on channel 1. Let's go and talk on channel, not number 1 through 100. Let's go and talk on channel Z. And the government's like, wait, is there even a channel Z? And like, whatever. They're communicating across different protocols that don't even exist right now. That's the type of thing that we can build, and it's like trying to get someone to shut you down when you can dictate the terms of your communication. Okay, I'll try to. Okay, you can shut down someone's radio station. You can't shut down someone's CB radio when they're broadcasting in Morse code. You can't cut off that communication network. You can't cut off that communication when they're communicating in Morse code, and when you actually crack that they're, the code of the dots and the dashes, and then they switch to some new completely different medium because they found out you're listening on their calls, and now you've got to crack some new code. It'll constantly be changing, and every time somebody gets close to figuring out what you're doing, the protocol changes, and now you're communicating in a completely different way. You could be sending audio files to each other, and then they have some way of decrypting the audio file on the other and to turn it into video or to turn it into word text. Like, these are technologies that exist. The only thing bearing this or stopping that sort of thing is happening is right now the internet has specific protocols that people communicate over. And now, if you have a network that isn't reliant on those protocols and can dictate its own protocols, who can stop that sort of thing when you're communicating in codes of codes? So, I mean, I'm passionate about this sort of thing, but I'm also very, very frustrated that I can't even get somebody to hear a 5-minute presentation on what it is that I've been building. Other than you guys, but I mean, as far as someone who actually has the influence and the money in order to help me out with this sort of thing. And I'm like, this is revolutionary and beyond revolutionary. I mean, it's like, if the internet is the Gutenberg press, well, actually, maybe that's not, right? I'm trying to come up with, because I was like, what's the next? I'm like, well, this is the new internet. And I'm like, no, not quite the same. But this is the next big evolution in internet. And it's going under the radar right now. And it's going under the radar because the people with the money are looking for existing solutions. The people with the money and influence, they're looking for copy-paste solutions. And you can't copy and paste your way to a revolution. All right. That's just my thoughts and my frustration. And starting in January, when I move to my new job, I will be forced to choose between working my job and working my side business, or working my job and working Funfair, or running my side business and Funfair, and I can't juggle all three. So the one that gets cut is Funfair, because that's the one not putting anything back in my pocket. So yeah, rip Funfair. Unless unless I can actually get feedback from these people that have money and have influence, that's not likely to happen. In which case, the dream is dead. All right. Yeah, it's. Yeah, and unfortunately, yeah, apparently my OBS was not recording the Hangout stream at all as far as the audio goes, so I will have to mirror this. As that is the case, I am going to stop streaming with this version of OBS and go back to my normal OBS. This is the Streamlabs OBS, and I was trying to get that set up because I'm like, man, I can't believe I didn't look into Streamlabs earlier, but they're just freaking awesome. And if you guys should start using Streamlabs too, because then you could actually, if you've got supporters who actually try to comment in chats and want to do super chats, Streamlabs doesn't take 30% like YouTube does, and Streamlabs actually doesn't take any percentage of what people contribute. Yeah, it gives you, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Streamlabs will get you there. It's not exactly you can't do subscriptions and stuff like that, but you can do one-time donations, and they don't take a cut of it. Um, which is like I'm still looking into how they achieve that, but from what I see on their it's possible that they were just a benevolent um, whoever created it. They're like, hey, we'll pop down $5,000 to $10,000 on the necessary software, and then we'll just plug in these APIs, and well, that's the existing stuff that's already there. It's and then they like, oh well, we don't need our money back. That's very very possible. I'm not in a financial situation where I could be like, oh, here's $10,000, enjoy. I'm like, if I'd have to make my money back before I could. Yeah. So it's very possible the people behind Streamlabs did that. That is, which that's looking at their stuff. I'm like, well, that's the only way I could see it is they weren't intending for this to be a business, and they're like, hey, it's only going to be, X amount of dollars. Okay, we can afford to lose that, and they went ahead and did that. Well, yeah. And so I would say if you're going for a platform that's going to take the least amount of your contributions, and it acts in the same way as Super Chat, the Streamlabs thing does, because people will submit it actually, yeah, it's better at tracking your subscriber or your new followers and stuff like that. That's what I'm saying. I don't think Streamlabs make a profit. I think they set it up originally knowing that they weren't going to make a profit. But so what it is right now is their operating cost is nothing. From what I can tell, for Streamlabs to continue to do what they do, either the cost is very minimal or it's non-existent at all. So it took an initial amount of money to get it started in the first place, but now that it's there, it doesn't cost them anything to run. Or it's so low that they can, they don't mind going out of pocket to keep it going. That's from my impression that's what seems to be the case. I don't know how accurate that is. Anyway, they don't seem to be in it for profit, and as far as I've seen, they don't do ads or anything like that. Although there is a pop up at the top from Streamlabs as far as donating to improving the platform and that sort of thing. So maybe they're entirely reliant on donations of people. All right, so I'm gonna end this OBS and end this stream. And Koten, are you Charlie Green? Is that the same person? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I am sorry because we are. Okay. Because what that means is we're starting about an hour late. All right. So I'm gonna end my stream here.